This tutorial will explain how to create the symmetrical type design project. This project is meant to refresh your memory about Adobe Illustrator and also some typography and color theory vocabulary. The first thing you'll need to do is open Illustrator and go to File, New, and make sure you name your document. I'm just going to call it Type Design. I'm going to keep it at 8.5 by 11 inches. Not really changing much here except making sure that the units are actually in inches rather than points or anything else. And click OK. So now I've got a workspace that I'm going to start designing a small square. And in the square, I'm only going to be using letters to create a design. So I'm going to get my square tool, and inside the document, I'm going to double click and make sure that I've typed in 4 inches by 4 inches. If it says PT here, it must mean that you're in points, so you would probably want to make sure your document was set in inches before you started. And then if you hit OK, you're going to see a square on your screen. And I'm going to change the square to be no fill and a black stroke. You may also want to lock the square so that it doesn't move around as you design. To do that, you would just go Object, Lock, Selection. Feel free to use any hotkeys or keyboard commands during these tutorials, but I usually go to the menus so you can see what I'm doing. Now I'm going to start designing with some letters. So I'm going to click once with my T tool. I'm going to start with the letter A. And with this letter A, after I've typed it, I'm going to hold down Shift to constrain the proportions. And this A is pretty straightforward. It's just a Myramid Pro, the default font, but I'm going to go to Type, Font. I'm going to choose something a little fancier to work with. In fact, I'm going to go really fancy on this first one. This is a really fancy Art Nouveau caps letter. Now, the point isn't to make the letters represent letters. It's to think of them as a design element. So I'm actually going to put this right into the corner. The bottom right-hand corner is sort of where your focal point should be. That's going to be sort of the center of the snowflake, if you will. So I'm going to move this, shrink it down a little bit, and just kind of place it right there in the corner. Now we're working with a color harmony here. So to figure out my color harmony, I'm going to choose a base color, which is going to be a shade of red. And then if I go to Color Guide, I'm actually going to pull this right over here so we can look at it. My base color is red. And if I click on this pull-down menu, it's going to show me all of my color harmony options. And there's so many choices in here. I think I'm going to stick with analogous. Once you've set up this, you've got your analogous color choices that you can now work from. Feel free to play around and decide what you want to use for each. If you want to actually set up a few new colors in your palette, you can bring them all in with this icon, or just choose a few that you think you'd like to stay with for the rest of this project. You can always come back to this, but I like to just kind of set up a few new colors that I'm going to stick with for my color harmony. Let me get one more in here. All right, so I've got my color set, and I'm sticking with that color harmony. And now I'm going to just fill in some more letters. So again, I'll get my T tool, click once. I'm going to use the letter N. I'm sticking with my initials. You can feel free to use different letters if you'd like. I'm going to switch fonts now to something totally opposite. So I'm going to go with maybe like a sans serif decorative N. And with this, I'm actually going to make a little stripe of N's together. So I could do this a couple different ways. I think I'm just going to type N, N, N. So it almost looks like a zigzag pattern. And then I'm going to choose one of my colors that I have selected, and I'm going to rotate this so it sort of goes across right through here. You really never know what you're going to get when you're doing this design, so it's kind of fun to play with it and see what you can come up with. Now I'm going to do an H next. And this time with my H, I'm going to go really big. And I'm going to change it to something that has a little bit of an angle toward it. And this is more blocky. This is a very blocky letter form. And I'm actually going to choose my color. And then I'm going to change the transparency. So I'm going to make it see-through. So that's at 50%. If I put this on top of anything else, I should be able to see through to the design. See how it kind of overlaps together. Okay, so I want this little piece that's hanging off to go away. So to do that, a lot of people would assume there's an eraser you could use, but remember Illustrator doesn't really erase. You actually have to tell it the shape that you're cutting off. So I'm going to click on the H, and I'm going to go Type, Create Outlines. That makes it into an actual shape with the blue dots around it. And then I'm going to get a rectangle, and I'm just going to drag over the part I want to erase. Now that I have those two pieces, I'm going to hold Shift and click. So I've got them together, and I'm going to bring up my Pathfinder. The Pathfinder is an excellent tool for removing things that you don't want anymore. So there I removed it. As you can see, it made an adjustment, put it back to 100%, and I wanted it at 50. So there I have it right up against the edge of the square. So I'm just going to do maybe 2 more letters. I'm going to do another A. You can spend a lot more time on this for my tutorial. I'm going to make it a little shorter so that we can wrap things up and learn how to do the repeat section. Okay, so I'm going to do another A up in this corner, and this time I'm going to go with sort of this light peach, and I'm also going to adjust the transparency quite a bit, maybe 40%. So I have a lot of different shapes going on. I could probably fill in something over here. It's looking a little empty. Do one more letter A. I'm going to find a little more decorative, curvy novelty font in here. This Annabelle looks a little extreme, but I'll do a scripty font that has some detail to it. One should be interesting. Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to go with kind of a dark brown. Almost looks black, but I want this to sort of pop right here at the bottom. So here's my finished component, and I may want to make adjustments later. I am going to fill in a background color. So I'm going to go Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And I think this is way too dark, so I'm just going to make it like a soft gray. So here's my square. I'm now going to go Object, Unlock All, and I'm going to remove the black border. That was just telling me where my design was going to go. So now what I'm going to do is group this, Object, Group, and I'm going to duplicate it 4 times so I have a grid. But each time I duplicate, I'm going to make a rotation. This one needs to flip. So I'm going to go to Edit, I'm going to go to Object Transform and Reflect. Now I want it to flip vertical, so I hit OK. And now I've got a mirror image that's facing. Now the second copy I want to do, make sure that's lined up properly, is I want to drag these two at the same time. Option drag. And this time, instead of reflecting, I'm just going to rotate it. Remember, if you hold Shift as you rotate, it'll give you a perfect 90-degree rotation. And then you're just going to arrange this like so. So here's my snowflake symmetrical type design. I like parts of it, and there are parts that I don't like. It's very common to need to go back to that original square. In fact, I probably should have reserved one off to the side, so if I wanted to make that adjustment, I can go back, make the adjustment on that, and then try the last step again. So this concludes the tutorial. Be sure to be creative and unique with your design. Try multiple type styles, at least experiment with the Pathfinder and transparency. When you finish, we're actually going to print and display them. They make a really lovely display. And during class, I may even show you some ways to add some pattern and texture to the design.